So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, January the 21st. And outside the temperatures are extremely low. Did you see that opening? No joke. 0 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 18 degrees Celsius. This is episode 143 of Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is The Way to Bee. So I'm glad you're here with me. We have a lot to talk about today. But we won't shoot through it very fast. We've got some interesting topics to cover, and I appreciate those of you who sent in questions over the past week, and some of these that we're going to talk about today were submitted as recently as 2 hours ago. I'm on it. That's right. So, what else can we talk about? If you want to know what we're going to talk about today, please look down in the video description below, and you're going to see every topic item by item. Those topics will appear again later as a pinned comment in the comments section with associated timestamps, so you can get right to it if you want to skip over all the routine hubbub. So let's get right into it. Question number 1 comes from Mark Bidwell, longtime viewer, comments frequently. Says that he was talking about at the Hive Life conference, they had these see-through panels that you could put on your bee veil so that you could see things better. And he was trying to get one. I guess they sold out at the Hive Life conference. We're still talking about that. Everybody's still happy about that, as well they should be. At this time, I'd like to talk to you about your Flow Hive, your Flow version of that viewing screen. And in one of your upcoming question sessions, like on Fridays with Fred's The Way to Bee, I think a lot of old eyes may benefit. And it's also got an inch of snow here, and not enough to try the snow flower someday, and so on like that. So let's jump right into it. So that was the cover picture. This is made by the Flow Company, and it is a veil that goes on your regular bee suits, and look how clear the faceplate is on it. It comes with a clear plastic coating that you peel away. There's one on the inside, one on the outside. I have 2 of these, and it zips, of course, onto the front, and you have the option to put the screen veil back on. So you can have screen veil or the clear see-through veil. What's the purpose of that anyway? It's so you can see queens, so you can see eggs, so you can see larvae, so you can see everything in your beehive clearer. And there's another feature to it. They have this little Velcro strap on top. And if you want it pushed out all the way, so this actually has a good distance from the back of your head to the front. So maybe you want to avoid fogging it up and things like that. So there's Velcro on the top. And some people like to wear a baseball hat on their head, and that keeps it pushed away and things like that. I tested this out in the fall, and I'm actually glad that Mark asked the question because I had not commented on it. And the reason is, see how the venting is here underneath so that you can breathe through that. But the problem that I had with it, living in a colder climate, my breath fogged up the mask frequently. So, yeah. Fogged up the interior, and once it does that and it's wet, there's no way for you to clean that up. I mean, you'd have to unzip it, stick your hand up in there, and clean it off. So if you're going to wear a veil and you're going to look through it, if it covers the entire faceplate like this. Now, if you're in a warmer climate, it won't matter. It'll give you a clear field of view for the entire upper half, and then down here where your mouth is, which is, by the way, another reason why I suggest that you wear a baseball hat. Because I liked it better if it would lift up off your head a little bit. So lift up to here. Let's see where my mouth is. Right with the venting. If it sits down on my head, like it normally would, where's my mouth? Right in line with this piece of plastic. So then you're fogging it up. So if you can get it up off your head a little bit, now you're breathing through the screened area, you're good to go. Some of you may be asking, well, what does something like that cost? And I can tell you because I looked it up today. It costs you $44.50 for that veil with the replacement screen. Screens are black so that it cuts down on glare and things like that. Some people have experimented with spray painting their screens white. I see no benefit to that. Some people think that bees will attack a darker veil and then they won't attack a white veil. And I think there's little support for that unless you already have defensive bees. But is there an alternative? Because that comes from New South Wales and you have to buy a Flowhive jacket, which, by the way, they're reasonably priced. And they make two different designs, one for the after 2017 production line for the Flowhive people, and the other is 2017 and older. Is there an American option? There is. Surprise, surprise. And so there was something at the Hive Life Conference in Sevierville, Tennessee. It was called the EZC. And what that did is you could have your favorite bee suit. So what's your favorite vented bee suit? Oh, maybe it's Guardian Bee Apparel's vented bee suit, which has a zipper so you can take your veil down and you can like drink coffee and stuff, or maybe a hot chocolate. And it's your favorite suit. You don't want to part with it. You don't want to buy a brand new suit or a brand new veil just so that you can get a veil with a clear top. So the EZC goes right in here. So you cut out the veil. Oh, wait a second. Wouldn't it be cool to see one? To see how somebody uses it? So I'm going to do something special today, and I hope that you'll do what I'm about to ask you to. I've decided that every Friday, if I can find someone who has a video that answers a topic that somebody else, somebody asked me a question, to sit here and just answer it when I can actually send you, my viewers, who are very easygoing, super nice people, to somebody else's channel to say, hello, Fred sent us, let's see your video here on the EZC. So where do you think I'm going to send you? Go to, you can search it on YouTube, or you can click the link in the video description below. It's called Larry Lee's Bees. So you can click on that link, and his current video right now, it's a charmed moment because Larry Lee was also at the Hive Life Conference, and he got some of those EZC inserts, and he demonstrates how to put them in, and he gives you his opinion about it. So please go to Larry Lee's Bees, show some support for a fellow beekeeper, tell him hello, and watch his video. Tell him what you think about it. Let's encourage beekeepers that are providing information that's useful to other beekeepers. So every week I'm going to try to do that. Send you to another video. Question number 2, Robin. I'm planning one season ahead. Currently, I have 2 hives. First year beekeeper in southeast Pennsylvania. And I'm thinking about increasing my apiary to 4 with a couple of reserve nukes. Nukes are nucleus colonies. They're small. I'm hoping to do this with spring splits and would like your opinion regarding the debate. See, I didn't know this debate was that strong. But the debate of whether to split with the queen and the frames going into the new box, or leaving the queen and moving brood frames along with the new box. Thanks again. Okay, so this is an easy one for me. Because once again, we're backyard beekeepers. In this case, the target is to get 4 hives going. Has 2 hives now. Very easy to do, by the way. You can double your colonies of bees every year pretty easily. And you do that with splits. And I like to do something called walk-away splits. Now, I know how to raise queens, and we could graft queens, or we could, set up a queen starter hive, and then we can have a finisher hive, and then those queens have to go out and they have to mate and everything else. But if you're a backyard beekeeper and you only have between 4 and 20 hives, a bunch of queens is just going to be too much. So there's a much easier way. Let the bees make their own, and it's called a walk-away split. And that's what we're talking about here. And when you do the walk-away split in the springtime, and I highly recommend, by the way, that you have nucleus boxes, regardless of your level of beekeeping. I also recommend, and I'm sorry for those who manufacture the core flute, the plastic boxes, and the ones that look like fishing tackle boxes and things like that. My preference is for the wooden boxes that hold 5 deep frames. Because sometimes nucleus colonies also, the boxes come with medium frames, for example. So my personal preference is deep frames, 5-frame boxes, and I'll explain why. So you're in springtime, you've got these colonies and they're just bustling and they're kicking hiney and they're reproducing and there's plenty of brood. So we want at least 6 frames of brood, 5 to 6 in there on a 10-frame box, let's say. Now we're going to split those resources. Now the queen's in there and she made it through winter, so she's awesome. But they're building up fast, and what else happens in spring? Swarming. So we can relieve congestion a lot of ways, because one of the things that backyard beekeepers want to do is restrict the number of colonies that they have. In this case, we're expanding, but it also can be used to reduce the number of brood, to reduce congestion in the hive, and therefore help reduce that instinct to swarm, which can also come from a heavy population in the hive. So now we're going to split them up. So take your 5-frame nucleus box out of wood, my preference, whatever size you use. And we want to put 3 out of 5 frames in that new box with eggs and larvae. And then we want a frame of honey and we want a frame of pollen, hopefully, right? So now that's 5 deep frames. Now for me, it's never mattered if the queen was on one of the frames that I transferred or if the queen remained behind. So I didn't want to spend an inordinate amount of time hunting for the queen, looking for her. And I need to see those eggs. So you need something that you can see through. Although, let's be clear, I find eggs and stuff like that easily by wearing glasses with a regular screen. I've never really had to have the clear view. I thought it would be a great idea, but it's kind of unnecessary in the end for me. So anyway, what happens when we look at them, the population is building and they have not started creating queen cells yet? So we don't see a bunch of preparations for swarming in the form of producing replacement queens, which means they're going to start running their current queen around the hive. They're going to reduce her feed, they're going to get her to lose weight, and they're going to make her flight ready. So one of the things we satisfy by removing the queen, the current queen, and putting her into the new box is we start to take away one of the triggers for swarming. So we remove a bunch of brood, we remove eggs as insurance, and we have open larvae. And we put those in the new box with the queen. If you can find her, that's my preference, because now what's left behind? You have to leave eggs behind. We have to leave some capped brood, some open larvae, and this is insurance. And the reason that we can greatly reduce the existing colony more so than the one that we're starting. So we put the queen in the new one, but a lot of those foragers that go in there that are in that colony are going to go back to the old one, right? So the nucleus hive is already going to suffer a loss of field workers. So it's going to slow them down. But the queen's in there, so she's going to lay. And as those nurse bees that transferred with those frames, as they graduate to the outdoor positions, they only know that hive, and it is a nucleus hive, so we don't want it to build too fast or out of control, because remember, we're not commercial, we're just backyard beekeepers. Now, the colony that we took them out of, hopefully, they had not already started to make preparations to swarm, but if they have, we satisfied it. We created an artificial swarm. We took the queen out. They won't swarm without a queen. See what's happening? So then we leave them to build their own replacement queen. And we have insurance now, because we started another colony over here in a nucleus hive, and they have eggs, they have larvae, they have a queen, so they have a source of reproduction. And so this colony, let's say they fail to make a queen. Ultimately, they would end up broodless, because as you do an inspection, once you do a split like this, the next follow-on question is often, how long do I have to wait before I look to see that the split worked and that there is evidence of them building a replacement queen? I recommend you wait 10 days, just rough average. We have to also make our inspections coincidental with the weather. good weather conditions. So within 2 weeks, max, we want to look inside the colony that we believe we took the queen out of. There's a risk that there were 2 queens. So we have to look for eggs. If there's no eggs, voila, we got the queen out. The eggs will exist in the colony that got the queen that was in lay, right? So she's productive. So now what happens over here in the colony we just took her out of, we have an opportunity because now they've potentially gone broodless for a while. And when they're broodless and all those larvae are uncapped, what might we consider doing to help the residual hive get a boost? Treat them with oxalic acid vaporization. If they have mites, it's an opportunity to knock them flat right then. So the other colony continues. My preference is, long story short, I'm just giving you all the filler information about the logic behind why I do what I do. And you can easily double, or in some cases, depending on where you live, you can triple your hive numbers if you want to in this way. Now you've got your 5-frame nucleus box and they're going gangbusters. The queen was never out of lay. They have lots of nurse bees and everything. So now their population starts growing. Now what the heck? Well, now you add a second level to your 5-frame nucleus box, which is a 5-frame super. And you can put frames up there. And one of the good things that nucleus colonies are good for, because now we have 2 deep boxes, 5/5, and then we put you can have foundation in there, but you can also have foundation-less frames alternating. Foundation, foundationless, foundation, foundationless. We'll have 5 of them up there. That's after they've already started to fill out. Remember, we also gave them a frame of honey and a frame of pollen, or mostly pollen. And of course, as they're hatching out, they will be laying more eggs and the cycle repeats. But what that colony will do, because it's a small space and they go straight up, and what else rises? Heat. So they're going to make more fresh comb there. So this nucleus colony didn't just give us another colony of bees, taken from a strong colony that came through winter, which is outstanding. They're also producing a bunch of comb and stuff in the space up above. So now we can use them to produce comb. Then, once they've started to finish off the comb up above, and they may even migrate up there if we still have cooler temperatures in the spring, so they might actually move their brood rearing activities up into the top of that box. But ultimately, what will that easily transpose into? A 10-frame deep standard hive. 5 below, 5 above, 10 frames. So then when you go to transfer to a full-size hive, you'll take the brood, which is above and below, because they tend to do that in a column. So expect to see the middle 3 frames tend to be the brood areas, and they'll also continue to develop brood between those 2 frames. So now the most densely populated frames with larvae, those go in the center of your 10-frame deep box. And then, of course, those with honey and resources like that and the unfinished frames go to the outside of your 10-frame box. So from the center out, now we have a new hive, and we remove the nucleus boxes and we replace them with a standard hive, and you're good to go. And then as they fill up, you start supering. It's that easy. So to me, the resident colony that you've pulled these resources from has a huge advantage already, which is why I like to see the queen removed with your new hive. The other question is, how far away do they need to go? Do I need to take them miles away and then bring them back later and all this other stuff? No, backyard beekeeping. I've never done that. Haven't had to, because it's based on the reasons that I already described. Some of the bees that you moved into that new nucleus colony, nucleus hive, do not know where they live. They're resident. They're not going to go anywhere. And those foragers that were in there come back and they reinforce the resident hive that we took these resources from, because they have an advantage, right? That's why we took more resources and put them in the new box. We know that a lot of the foragers are going to go back and then they're going to occupy the original box. Plus they're going to be making a new queen, which is going to delay everything. And then they'll recycle and build up again. And the time that you would be doing this is when you see plenty of drones flying out of your colonies that you have, and that hopefully you're at the beginning of a meaningful nectar flow when things are really starting to come into bloom, because these are stages of rapid increase in your colonies of bees. So I hope that makes sense, and it is the best way, in my opinion. Let the bees choose which eggs become queens and so on. And if there were queen cups in there already, even though if they're started, just barely started, that's a great time to do it. Now you're ahead of the game. If you wait to do this until after there are swarm cells, which are queen cells along the bottom fringe of your brood frames, if you wait to do it then and they actually cap those, there's a very good chance the queen is already gone. So don't wait. This is why in the spring things happen super fast, and you're going to hear lots of beekeepers talking about they lost their favorite hive, they swarmed. You have to stay on top of it. When you get those swarm days, you're inspecting for evidence of the queen. Just find eggs and then button it up. You're also looking to make sure that they are not producing queen cells. If they are, you have to destroy those queen cells if you don't want them to go anywhere, and you need to expand the space for that colony. For those of you who are not expanding and making more colonies, you need to have a meaningful way of controlling your bees and keeping them from reproducing with new queens and then generating a whole new swarm. Good luck to everybody when spring comes. If you've got strong colonies, I'm really looking forward to see what the Hive Alive colonies did, those that have the fondant on them. Can't wait to see how well they do. Question number 3. This is from James Tant. I'm considering building an observation hive. How much maintenance specific to observation hives do you have to perform on your colony? I know I need to be able to feed and treat the bees, but what other features do you feel are good additions to an observation hive? Okay, observation hives. I like them a lot, by the way. The bees don't like them a lot. Here's why. And so the challenge is, how much maintenance is there on an observation hive? Well, you don't get to inspect it the way you do your other standard Langstroth hives, your horizontal hives, or your Layens hive, because it's interior. It's a hive inside a building. So, but the good news is, your inspections are every day for as long as you want. You sit there with your hot chocolate, your cappuccino, whatever you like to drink. You go in there for 5 minutes just to check up on them. So you pull the panels off of your observation hive, and there's glass on both sides, and you sit down to look at them for 5 minutes. 4 hours later, after you wake up, because the sound of the bees, the activity of the bees, this is real therapy for people that want to relax, that want to get away from others, and are fascinated by everything that's going on inside the hive. You find yourself just locked in place staring at them. So that's a risk, downside. You lose a lot of time looking at your bees. Now what they really turn into is a swarm machine. So what I would like to say for those thinking about an observation hive, get the largest observation hive that you can afford, and you have to consider the physical weight of the hive. So mine are, I wanted to say they're 4 tall, so 4 deeps, and they're in pairs. So there's just 2 frames, and 2 frames above each other all the way up. So we've got 4 height, 8 frames, 8 times 7. So you've got the potential weight there, assuming all those frames were full of honey. So that's what you would use to guesstimate your maximum weight of that hive. But then there's the structure of the hive too. And you might ask, where did you get your observation hive originally? I got it from a company called Bentera Bees, and it was the largest one I could find. It was called the Swing View, and that meant that it's hinged on the wall. There's a hole through the bottom, and of course one of the mounting brackets that supports the whole thing has the 1.5-inch conduit going through it, which takes your bees to the outside, which I'm about to tell you is not my favorite configuration, but you understand it was a swing view. So it had to be able to move, which is why the hole goes through the bottom, which later became a problem because during this time of year, you can't see into that elbow. So you can't see what's going on, and dead bees were piling up in there, and before I realized it one year, they had kept the bees from flying out. So by the time I realized that that's what was going on, and I stuck a vacuum tube in there and drew all the dead bees out and made it clear, and they did start flying right away, but they had already diminished too much on the inside of the hive, and we weren't looking at it because it was in an unheated building, and therefore they had insulation panels on both of the glass plates. So these are things to think about. Is it going to be in a heated space? Is it going to be in an unheated space? Those are also considerations. Now, Since I plan to build new ones and put them in an unheated space, they're going to be bigger. So I'm not going to buy a pre-existing kit, which, by the way, that Swing View observation hive without glass was in the neighborhood of $800. That's a lot of money for some 2x4s and some wood trim and a couple of brackets. But since all the work was done for you, if I didn't buy the kit, I ultimately never probably would have gotten around to it. But I'm hoping in the future to have more time to do carpentry and work like that. So anyway, I'm going to custom build my own. They're going to be bigger. They're going to be thicker. So I want them in groups of 3. And you might say, well, if you have 3 frames, we can't really see what's going on inside where the brood is and all that other stuff. Oh, yes, you can. You're just not going to see what's going on with that center frame. And it's very important because now that we have a center frame with an outside frame on either side of it, where's the cluster going to be? Between those 2 outer frames, and the center frame is going to become your winter brood area. And now we're 4 high, so we've got that column there. So it's actually a very good configuration. With just 2, they really couldn't do a great job of insulating the bees, insulating the brood in the wintertime. So they rose to that top. So they had 25% of the hive available to them. And even though you insulate the outer panels, it just wasn't enough. So I recommend, if you're building your own, a minimum of 3 deep frames thick. So then, beyond that, I also recommend that you go at least 3 high. 4 would be better, but that thing is going to be heavy. So you have to consider your physical limitations because it's inside a building. When it comes time to do maintenance on that, or if you've got a condition inside that hive that you need to contend with, or you need to do a more thorough inspection, you're going to have to be able to do 2 things. One, you have to close off the entrance so the bees are retained, and you need to be able to disassemble that or disconnect it from the wall. And then you're probably going to need somebody to help you carry it out. And then you do your maintenance outside near their entrance, which is also blocked, by the way. So you need 2 blocks, one on the unit itself that gets moved. The other block is to make sure that the entrance is closed off because you've got foragers outside that are going to try to get into that space and their hive is gone. So that's a consideration. The other thing is, what I did is I researched plexiglass and lucite, and I tried to get the clearest panels because I was thinking about the physical weight of the unit. And that was a mistake. I bought these very nice, very expensive, custom cut panels of lucite and had those brought in. I put those on, and you know what they did? So here's the outside of it, here's the inside. They went concave. And when they do that, you lose bee space on the face of some of your frames. So I either needed to have a spacer in the middle of the hive that kept them pushed out and kept them parallel, because I'm not worried if they bow out a little, but really all they did was contract in. So if you're going to use lucite, have a spacer midway between the top and bottom that goes between your frames. So you've got a full frame here, full frame down here, right between it. Keep that space. And then the fix for that, though, is, and this is what I'm using on my future beehives, I have to go to a glass shop and I have to get tempered glass. So my next hives will be 3 deep, minimum of 3 high, hopefully 4. Might have to do some weight training. But, and I'm going to have tempered glass. The second benefit to having tempered glass, better clarity, no flexing, no concavity on it. And when it comes time at the end of the season or whenever you're changing things out or doing your fall maintenance or whatever you're going to do, if the glass is tempered, you can warm it and you can clean off all of the burr cone, propolis, and things like that that are on it. The other thing is the insulation panels that you put together for the face of your observation hive. And again, if you're inside a building that's already heated, not a problem. All you need is to be able to darken your hive. So then you just have panels that just close it off and keep vibration. So vibration dampening material would be good, and covered in cotton cloth would also be nice, or muslin or something like that. Now if they're out in a shed or a building that's not heated and things get cold, then we have 2-inch insulation boards. Cover those in fabric and they should press right up against the glass. And then I just use clamps to hold them on for the wintertime. And then, of course, we just pull them off whenever we're looking at the bees. So those are my changes. And the other thing is where that entrance is. Make sure it's not in a walkway. So if you have a table, because these are going to go in my Way to Bee Academy building. So if you have a table right here, this is a comfortable height for looking at the bees and for taking notes and things like that. So consider where you're going to be sitting and how you're going to observe them, and then determine your height from that. And the entrance, I would say they come with a landing board on the entrance, but you could actually have, it's an 1.5 inch diameter entrance. I don't think you really need a landing board because I think they're fine without it in that circumstance. If you do have a landing board just under the 1.5 inch entrance, have a bigger overhang, an awning of some kind made out of wood or something else that will keep the rain and snow off of it so it doesn't pack up and block the entrance. So there's that. I think those are all the things that I would change and plan to change for my own. And no worries, I am going to make a video that shows my thought process, the design elements, and then the final versions. And once I get up, I'll probably make 3 of them at the same time, just because I'll be cutting the materials and everything else. Of course, they're going to be made out of red oak or something like that. So we're going to see how that goes. But if you want to check out Bonterra's bees and look to see what designs they have, and maybe that's a launching point for your own, or maybe you like what you see. If they're going to be inside a building, you're probably good to go with just the pairs like that. But because I wanted mine, I wanted the versatility of having them out in an unheated space, which, by the way, they survived it. They just would have done better if they had more thickness. So the other thing is, feeding, by the way. There is a hive top feeder opening up there, which I kind of thought was okay. They're not built to facilitate feeding other than the inverted jar style feeder. So you would have something like this. And not to gripe about that company, but they sell you this little skinny jar that has a pretty unique cover on it. And so it was almost proprietary that sits on top there. And you want to buy another one so you have 2 or 3 backups or whatever, because now it's only configured to feed liquid resources in winter. So what do you think I'm going to tell you to feed them in winter as far as an inverted jar goes? The bees can collect under there and get their emergency resources. ProSweet, super heavy. I have no affiliation with Mann Lake. I have no affiliation with their ProSweet. They don't even give a hoot that I mention them or not. But it has the consistency of honey without the problems associated with honey. So in other words, it keeps their metabolism clean so they don't have dysentery and things like that. So it's actually straight sucrose. It's going to help the bees out. It has fructose and glucose with it and a lot of trace elements, proprietary mixture there. So the bees have proven to do very well with that. So if you're going to feed them a liquid, I recommend in winter ProSweet. That's what I put on my observation hive in years past, and I had good results with it. Based on how abusive that system was to the bees, they should not have made it. So we can improve it for them, and I hope that I answered everything else. And you're going to be able to feed and treat the bees. Treatment, yes, you are going to treat with oxalic acid vaporization. By the way, it's the only treatment I do for bees. If they have mites. Now, you can't do mite counts really because that involves taking everything apart, pulling it off the wall. Let's just be real. People are not going to go through all that trouble to count mites. I think that if you're in an apiary where your other hives are having mite counts that are hitting a treatment threshold, that is reasonable to say you should go ahead and treat the mites in your observation hives as well with oxalic acid vaporization. The other thing is you get to watch it. You get to see how it works. How do you get it in there? Because it's an observation hive, you can't be using the pan version. So you're either going to use the ProVap 110 or the I'll put a link down below, the other bee ProVap system that's about half the price. Lorab bees? Lorab? Anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about. Any of the vaporizers that has a little 1/4 inch tube that sticks in through a 1/4 inch hole, which use a 1/4 20 threaded bolt to put in there as a placeholder, and then you can treat whenever you need to. So whenever they're broodless, and you can see it, and you see it goes through everything. So that's what I treat. If there's any other condition going on, if I suspect foul brood or something like that, pull that thing apart. Now we're kind of done. So you need to just be aware of what's going on with it. And you are going to probably have to take it apart a couple of times a year, especially in preparation of going into fall. And then of course in spring, before the big buildup happens, is usually when you're assembling everything and making sure they're queen right and everything is good. So it's a lot of fun. You will lose many hours looking at your observation hive. Question number 4. This comes from Brad from Chester, New Hampshire. Let's see. I'll be starting my beekeeping in the spring with a Flow Hive 2 Plus, and that's the newest version of the Flow Hive with those aluminum legs and everything else. Outstanding unit, by the way. And an Apame insulated hive. I'm planning to add a medium super above the brood boxes for extra food for the bees next winter. Currently 2 degrees Fahrenheit here. Gotcha beat 0. Anyway, next winter, should the fondant be placed on top of the brood box or on top of the medium super? So that's a good question. You need to accommodate feed that's solid like the fondant. And I'm going to take another opportunity to show the fondant. Historically, I never used fondant because I didn't trust myself to make it without creating HMF and all the negative stuff that happens if you have to cook something. So here's a plug again. So I'm using on half the colonies this year, and they're eating it. I'm very happy about it. But this is the thickness we're thinking about. Whether you make your own fondant, if you're a chef and you can do that kind of stuff and keep your parameters safe, or you found a fondant that's just perfect for what you want to do. The question is, the brood box is on the bottom. That's usually a deep box. Then you have a medium super. So if you follow kind of my formula through the years, I use a deep brood box on all my hives, and then I have a medium super that they fill with honey before we start putting on surplus resources, things that we want to gather at the end of the year. If we're harvesting honey, they have to have exceeded their deep and their medium. Those are their resources to get them through winter, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we're going to get no rain through summer or something like that. That's why I let them build that second box first just for them, and that's an emergency resource. And if you use weight scales and things like that, you'll see that rise and fall with the weather. So when we have really good weather and there's a nectar resource out there, you'll see the weight go up. And then when you get a week of rain, you'll see the weight go down because they're consuming the resources that they just brought on board. By the way, people think about bees using up resources and honey and everything else in wintertime. They use huge amounts of honey in summertime as well. So anytime, if they're in there and they're venting, you walk out into your bee yard and it sounds like a dryer vent system is running out there. Those bees are working their rear ends off, they're burning calories, and to do that, they're consuming the honey resources. So they consume a lot of honey even on hot days. Food for thought. So those bottom 2 boxes are theirs. Now the question is, going into winter, do you put this on top of that deep brood box? Or do you put this on top of the honey super up above? And I say put it on top, up above of your super. Because as they work their way through the food resources during the wintertime, and Dr. Leo says they rise at 1 millimeter per day. I don't know how he determined that, but I've recycled that information for a long time without proving or observing that myself. But we know that they rise and they tend to stay towards the center, and they consume the honey resources as they go up. Now, that's why on the top we have emergency resources. So in other words, we're not putting this up there as their primary food, although a lot of people have written me and said, hey, I put the Hive Alive fondant on top of there, and they went into it immediately. And I'm wondering if they bypassed all their honey and just went for the Hive Alive fondant. And for me, that's a non-concern. Because if they're in the Hive Alive fondant or whatever fondant you choose to use, and they still have honey resources down below, now it's your job to keep providing the resource so they don't consume it and run completely out. The fact that they're eating something, what do we know about the colony? Colonies that are still relatively strong, that still have a good population, they're consuming resources. Colonies that are in decline that are dying out, they're the ones that stop using resources, and you don't see them in the feeder. And if you have a rapid round on there with sugar or mountain cap with sugar, they're not consuming it. Those are colonies in decline. So when I can pop a lid and look through the plastic on the fondant and see bees up in there eating it, that's a colony that's still doing well. So it's an emergency resource, goes all the way on top. One of the reasons for that is you can look at it. Now, this is another consideration. You're going to hear the term feeder shim. All a feeder shim is something that creates a space. It might be an inch thick. It might be 2 inches thick, right? And the feeder shim gives you space to pour sugar in there on top of newsprint as an emergency feed on the top. Or it gives you a place to put something like fondant. Again, there must be something under it to keep it in place, and then the bees start to chew through it. So once you do that, you have a cover that you're going to pull off, and that lets you see the fondant that you have on a day, hopefully, that's warm enough to do it. And you need to plan that activity, especially in winter, so that when you look at it, you're prepared to do things fast and close it back up. Now this year, I've been using insulated inner covers. So for me, this is the inner cover for the hive in winter. The fondant sits right on top of it like that, and there's no airflow through here, and then the feeder shim is around this. And for that, I've been using a medium box because that will accommodate fondant in winter or syrup in summer. So we've got a medium box around this and then an insulated outer cover above that. This becomes the feeder shim, and it also is the inner cover. So then your medium box would be below this, and then your deep brood box below that. So by the time they're up here against this, they're consuming emergency resources. But again, a colony that's consuming anything is alive. So they're actually, that's for me a good sign, not the end of the world. And those fondant packs are less than $5 each. If you're a backyard beekeeper, great investment. So that's the configuration I recommend. So I don't recommend just putting it between their honey stores and the brood box underneath, which was the question. First of all, I would have to, again, put a shim in there to create the space necessary. I don't like the idea of smushing it down there. So question number 5, Ron Horn. Hey Fred, or Frederick if you prefer. I prefer Fred. That's fine. I know Frederick Dunn sounds kind of formal. I love your artwork on the front of your hives. Thank you. It says, I'm getting ready to order my first flow system and would like to know if you offer that artwork to other beekeepers. Okay, so the artwork that we're talking about, and thank you for calling any marks that I put on a hive art. Many of you may not know that I have a background as an artist. I got certificates in art. I used to oil paint, maritime paintings and stuff. If you go to the Great Lakes Naval Base in Chicago, Illinois, my paintings are registered as historic works, and therefore they can't get rid of them. That means when they have change of commands and those division officers and department heads head out, they can't go over there and go, I'm going to take that painting with me. So anyway, I just wanted to plug that in. It was a curious story. If you want to feel old, find out that your work is listed as historically registered equipment, which gets passed on and retained. But I do on beehives, pyrography is fun to do, wood burning. For those of you who may have many years ago had the little copper chisels on the heated things and you burn pine with it and stuff like that. So I have several videos demonstrating that process, and then of course the tools that I use to do it. So you can be artistic and you can be not so artistic but rather persistent, and you can actually trace stuff on with graphite paper and stuff like that. A lot of people don't even know what that is anymore. But graphite paper lets you put a sheet of 8.5 by 11 graphite paper and then an image on top of it, and then you trace the image through the graphite paper and it transfers your image onto the wood, and then you go into that and then you start doing your wood burning. And that can be very primitive looking, but you can learn to work out the shading and how dark it gets when you burn it longer and things like that. So I will put a link to show you how I do it, because I would much rather, as a teacher, I used to teach art and design, if you can believe it. I would much rather teach you how to do it and let you go from there and make your own art if you can. Now, and it's very flattering. I get people that ask me to do artwork on the side of beehives and things like that, and I always want to say yes. But what I really have to admit is that I just don't have the time to do it. And I became a photographer because oil painting took so long. I used to paint portraits, that's right. Other than maritime art and significant scenes of maritime history and stuff like that, which is a lot of fun. I painted people's portraits. It used to take me 6 weeks to do it, 3 2-hour settings. And I had a traditional method, so layer upon layer, glazing, the whole 9 yards. And then at the end of that, somebody would say, that doesn't really look just like me. But you know what? People rarely say that when it comes to a photograph. So I made a transition from oil painting to photography. So now I can take 100 portraits in a day if I need to. And it's immediate. And they can't say, I don't look like that. I would tell you a funny story, but this is a beekeeping channel. But I have really funny art stories, by the way, if anybody ever wants to know about them. So I can't sell my artwork. I mean, I would love to be able to do that. I just have to be honest about having the time. You'd have to ship me the box or the panel. I'd do the artwork on the panel, and then I'd have to ship it back. And it takes me a full afternoon to do a decent pyrography job, and I just have to be honest and say I don't have the time to do it, but please look at the links down below in the video description, and I did do tutorials on exactly how to do pyrography, which is just a fancy term for wood burning. So thanks for the question. Next is number 6, and this is from Gary. This spring, when I pull extra frames of honey to make room for the flow, how do I store those frames for short and long term to feed early or late swarms? Can I freeze frames full of honey, and how long can I freeze them for if possible? Okay, so here's the thing. When you do pull frames out of hives, putting them in storage is important. It has to be protected storage, but the question is about whether or not you can freeze them, and if you freeze them, how long can you freeze them for? What is the impact of putting them in a freezer? So the other thing is, you better have a lot of freezer space. And you'll find that you can find pretty inexpensive freezers, horizontal freezers in particular, and you need to think ahead and have racks for your frames. I would, that's what I'd be thinking about. And when you put your frames of honey, capped honey preferred, you put that in the freezer, what does it do? Well, it's going to kill off any eggs that have been laid by wax moths. So wax moth larvae, little tiny larvae that actually can be in the comb that you wouldn't even see. You can't just look at the comb and go, I don't see any pests on there, so good to go. No need to freeze it. Going back to the observation hives, when there was comb up against the window, the glass, there were little tiny wax moth larvae inside the comb working their way through it, and their days were numbered because they're going to consume, they're going to grow, and as they grow they're going to be exposed, and the bees are going to get them, and the bees are going to get them out. But it was an eye-opener for me that within the thickness of the beeswax there would be tiny, like the thickness of that pen tip right there, the little larvae would be in there working their way through and doing their best to work into the thicker beeswax and stay away from the thin stuff because they didn't want to be pulled out by the bees, which ultimately there were no adult waxworms in there ever. So once they grew to a certain point, the bees got rid of them. But that's one of the things that when you put your frames in the freezer, you're killing larvae in the comb. You're killing eggs. You're also making sure that if you're in an area that has small hive beetles, you're making sure that if they've laid eggs, that those eggs die too. Now the next part of the question was, how long can I leave it in there? Indefinite. So if you're putting combs of honey, capped honey, in a freezer, you have a benefit. One of the things that happens is it won't solidify, it won't set, it won't crystallize in those cells. Because that's one of the problems that can happen sometimes when you pull frames of honey off a hive and you store it somewhere in room temperature. you'll find that it can actually crystallize in the cells, and therefore at that point you can't extract it, and the bees have to do a lot more work when it comes time to use it. So by putting it in a freezer, you kill parasites, you kill the eggs of parasites, and you arrest any potential for that to crystallize, assuming it hasn't started to crystallize before you put it in the freezer. So freezing is actually the best possible thing you can do. The reason most people don't do it is because it takes up a lot of freezer space, and most people use freezers for food. Weird, I know, but... So, get a freezer just for that stuff. Now, if you can't get a freezer and you put it through a freeze cycle, then you want to store it, I highly recommend Hive Butler totes, because you can clean them, you can sanitize them, and you can put your frames in there, and you can put desiccant packs in there, and they just keep condensation from forming on your frames, because that can happen too. And you see on the beeswax, sometimes you've got beeswax in storage, and you'll see on there that it oxidizes a little bit. And it's what is called the bloom sometimes. It looks like a little chalky surface on there. And if you come along and just hit that with a medium hair dryer or something, you'll see that chalkiness go right away. So condensation can form in a space that gets cold and hot, that goes through those cycles. So you want it to be in a space that's stable. But when your honey is stored, and if it gets cold overnight and the next day is warm and humid, and the humidity can cause condensation on the surface of the capped honey, and it can impact the moisture content of your honey. So you need to seal it, store it, protect it from additional moisture. So those are all things to consider. But back to the question, how long can you keep it in the freezer? Indefinite. Keep it in there as long as you want. It's actually very good for it. Question number 7, last question, by the way. So, Nicole Wells, thanks for all the great videos. I have a question. There is this new video out that showcases a new way of beekeeping. The guy uses 5 large 5-gallon plastic bottles to contain his hives. I actually think they become the hives because I've seen the video. He goes on about how this makes it easy to add new comb to the colony and prevent colony loss and degeneration. He also claims it minimizes mite infestations and makes it easy to see the bees and their condition without disturbing the hive. He also says it mimics the natural shape of a tree hollow without the drawbacks of moisture, mold, and buildup. With such a thin layer of plastic between the hive and the environment, do you think this method would survive a winter climate? Have you ever tried this method? And then here's the link for the video. Now, Nicole's talking about a video that came out recently, and man, I got emails about that video like the minute he launched it. First of all, I'm sure you all know already what it is because it's semi-viral. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that video doesn't have 1 million or more views already, because first of all, the guy's an influencer. He does a lot of handmade stuff. So a lot of, backwoods, survivalist kind of construction, very good craftsman and stuff like that. So, and I want to say that I think he has over 400,000 subscribers, so close to 500,000 subscribers. So this is why when he does something apparently easy, unique, good for the bees and all this other stuff, it just takes off like wildfire, because he is reclaiming plastic water bottles, and they're the big ones, like 5-gallon size water bottles, and they were an interesting configuration. They had multiple holes on them, connection holes and stuff like that. And the bees build the comb freely inside these plastic bottles. And then in the end, he's cutting through the plastic bottle and the comb at the same time. He doesn't really demonstrate how he gets all the bees out of it before he does that. And then, of course, now he's got cut comb for all practical purposes, because the cut comb that he has no frames on it. And then, so this appears super easy. People, the comments, I looked at the comments, and they're just nuts over it. It's just going to be the best thing ever. And then in another part of the same video, he's got this huge, heavy green colored screw together system. So it's big and it's obviously going to be heavy, and it's got frames in it, very unique frames. So it almost looks like top bar style frames. So the bees then build it down. Now we have removable frames, which was my first question when I saw the clear bottles. I thought, oh man, like here that would be illegal, first of all, because anything that you keep your bees in here in the United States has to be inspectable. So you need to be able to open it up and pull frames and look at all sides of your frames to make sure there's no disease concerns and things like that. So on the face of it already, here in this country, now I'm not sure what part of the world that video comes from, but here in the United States, first of all, to answer the question, would that be great in cold weather? No, because there's no insulation in it at all. The other potential that I looked at, and keep in mind, it's not like we can talk to them. You look at it and they're clear sides, so it has to be shaded somehow. Otherwise, sunlight hits that thing and it's a hot box, because it would need to be opaque somehow. It would need to be shaded, and there may be a housing that wasn't clear, that you put sun for the rest of the time. So it needs to be out of the sun, because a semi-clear or translucent material in direct sunlight in a hot climate would again melt the wax. Bees couldn't keep up with it and things like that. So there's a potential problem with that. And then of course the bottle is destroyed when you're cutting everything apart. So you're taking all the comb away, and then you had this really big wooden crush and strain system. So a big hinged wooden arm, and of course the fulcrum's down here, and there's a block that you put all the honeycomb that you've cut out of this bottle into this block, and then it presses it through, and then you collect, and then of course they show a jar of honey in the end that you collect underneath. So you've taken all their comb away and to get the honey out, and so it's also very expensive to the bees. You've got to completely reconstruct the comb that you've now removed. So the crush and strain method is very expensive as far as resources go for the bees. And then I don't know much about the big green screw-on system that he had. Maybe it clamps up. Again, we can't ask questions, but let's clear the air on it. What do I think? Other than those observations, because we can't sit down and talk about it right now, we can't see how he got there, how, what the failures looked like. How did you get started? How did you get the bees to go in there? How did, what's the longevity? What do you mean it has all these benefits? So here's what I say with anything new that comes out. I mean, wait and see. Watch and learn. See what really happens with the system. Let other people spend their money. I mean, I don't know if he's selling them even. The big green one looks like it's a commercial unit, so something they're trying to sell. The original water bottles, that's how, because it starts off, see, we have something to do with bottles that are otherwise just going to be disposed of. Instead, we can put bees in them. The bees will build comb. We get the comb, we get the honey, and somehow it's great for the bees, and we're going to cut the hive in sections. If somebody else knows the movie, please feel free. The video, you can link it right down in the comments section. It'll be delayed because links are automatically held, but I'll release it. And then the rest you can look at it and see what your thoughts are on it. But I have more questions than answers on the system. But the way it's presented, it's gone viral. So a lot of people are thinking you can get bees in a bottle. And there have been some other things that have come along that were troubling, and I am thankful that people send it to me. Better that too many people send me links to something than that I just don't hear of it at all. So I'm always going to be, welcoming when somebody sends something, even though I just scratch my head and think, oh my gosh, that doesn't necessarily look awesome. But there was another one that came out, and you've probably seen this too, where there were hexagonal frames that went on a wall inside a house. And they weren't much bigger than this, each one of them. And there was a tube coming in for the outside, so that was the entrance. And then as part of the advertising thing, you would just keep adding modules to it. So multiple frames, multiple hexagonal cells that had the beeswax and bees in it and everything else. And when they showed pictures of it, and that's what got me looking at it, I thought, well, why aren't they just showing videos Why are they just showing pictures of these multiple, like a mosaic going across the wall? And then when you look at them, it's the same unit over and over and over and over, even the same comb, even the same configuration in each of the ones. So then I realized they pieced that together through Photoshop and to sell a new system. So for anybody trying to produce something new and market it, you really have to be honest about what the potential downsides are, what the upsides are. If you start to present it in a way that is dishonest, that ultimately gets discovered and ultimately it doesn't go anywhere. But in the meantime, you had a viral video, and sometimes those things can earn people a lot of money for quite a long period of time. So I can't, totally shoot it down, and I can't, of course, support it. What I can do is recommend what I do, which is wait and see. Let's watch it. Let's just look at it and see where that goes and see if other people do buy it, and then see what kind of videos they put out about it, stuff like that. See how it's going. But cold climates does not look like it at all, just for the lack of insulation alone. So that's it. We're on to the fluff part. So we're into 2023. A lot of people are going to be, hopefully, marking your queen bees. And I did that. I marked more queens last year than I had in any year previous to that. And last year, the color for marking your queens was white. What's the color going to be for this year? Yellow. So get your yellow paint pens for your queen bees so you can mark them. Another interesting thing that would be fun to do, because you know who the biggest freeloaders are in the bee yard? Those are the drones. So there's a multiple things. So if you've got kids and you want to involve them in your bees, you want them to do fun stuff, and for some reason we never feel bad if the drones get picked on. So if you pick up drones because they can't sting the kids, they don't bite, they're just freeloaders, let's see what colonies they go into. So you can take these paint pens and you can catch and mark drones on their thorax, and then you can see which of the hives in your bee yard they end up showing up at. And you're going to pretty quickly figure out that drones are allowed to go anywhere they darn well please, and they make the nurse bees in that hive feed them. So it's pretty funny. And that's your queen marking practice, by the way. The other thing, these guidelines about the colors for the bees help you identify how many years old your queen is. Most people are not keeping queens anymore for more than 2-3 years kind of max. So another thing I was thinking about last year, because when we collect swarms, we look to see if the queen was marked, and it was easy then to figure out that it was one of my queens, but was it? So this is another thing I thought about. What if I departed from the color scheme that's accepted worldwide? We're not queen breeders. We're not shipping them to other people. Why not come up with our own color scheme for our own bees? So if I took my queens and marked them magenta, there's no question then, if I have other beekeepers in the area and I'm collecting swarms, if it's got a magenta marked queen in there, that's mine. Unless they watch this video and they decide to copycat me, which I highly doubt. So if you come up with a unique color that's not in the Will You Raise Good Bees color list, right? Then color it a unique color, and then you know if those are yours. And then do the thing with the kids to get them to engage in a backyard experiment marking those drones. My grandsons love it. The first thing they say when they come in the bee yard, not today, obviously, but you have any drones? Because they just like to hold them in their hands, and they feel brave. So that's fun. Also, for those of you who are thinking about controlling your swarms, or maybe you want to do some minimal expanding in your backyard apiary, those nucleus boxes, and then you have to buy the second story nucleus boxes too, which are empty, and the other one has, of course, the bottom board in it. There's a question that's missing from today. Somebody had a question about, I thought I printed it out, but now it hits me, so I'm going to talk about it. They have the nucleus wooden boxes, and you have a choice when you get those. Sometimes it's a box with a standard bottom board, and the bottom board has a little entrance reducer in it, so it looks like the standard 10 frame Langstroth box with a standard bottom and the entrance reducer. Or the ones that I use are the ones that the bottom is permanently attached to that bottom box, and then there's just a hole in the front, which is an inch or so off the bottom, and then there's a wheel that controls it. So these big plastic wheels that you see on my nucleus colonies, they're either wide open, or it's vented, or it's a queen excluder, or it's a bumblebee excluder. Man, I thought I had one in here. Anyway, so the question was, they had it tilted towards the landing board, but there's no landing board on the ones that just have the hole in it, and also the bottom doesn't come off. So water had accumulated in there. So I had a couple questions about that. How did you know the water accumulated inside? Because the hole's up here, bottom's down here. But what to do about the water, and is it detrimental? There's nothing stopping you from drilling what's referred to as a weep hole. So you could do an 1/8 inch diameter hole or something like that, and drill that on the low end right up below that hole, right? Because now if moisture collects in there, it has a way to leak out. And if any cold air and stuff comes in, that's no worse off than the entrance itself. And you could even do a couple of different holes like that. But generally, I've not had a problem with water accumulating like that inside. And would it be detrimental? I could see it getting messy, because if you've got any dead bees at the bottom in the wintertime and condensation goes down there and condensation soaks those dead bees, you've got a bigger kind of moisture issue to deal with. So that might be a vote for the nucleus boxes that have a standard bottom board with an entrance reducer, because then moisture, of course, would run out of that. So that is going to be something that people will have to be aware of. If you've got the boxes like mine, where the bottom is a permanent part of it, there's the hole, and now we have an area where we could actually trap moisture. So weep holes. But so now it's another kind of decision thing for the bottom board design. Interesting. I'll put a link to those boxes too, so you can look at that. That is all for today. I want to thank you for spending your time with me, and I hope that you're about to have a fantastic weekend, and I also hope it's a little bit warmer where you are than it is where we are. So great time to plan your spring, get your equipment, and what am I going to tell you to do? If you haven't done it already, and I hope you stuck it out with me, go to Larry Lee's Bees. The link is down in the video description before. Tell him hello from me and watch his Easy See demonstration. Thanks for being here today. Have a great weekend.